Hey guys, this is Sandeep from RevAtlas and here is our camera comparison between the Poco X2 smartphone and the iPhone 11 Pro Max. Now I know that these are not natural competitors, but the way that the Poco X2 has been performing in our camera tests seriously punches above its weight, so we just wanted to compare it to a true full-fledged flagship to see just how much it can deliver. Now before we get started, please do make sure to hit the subscribe button and also take part in our giveaway of the Poco X2 by heading over to the link in the description below or checking the pinned comment as well. Now let's get this video started. The Poco X2 is equipped with a primary 64 megapixel 1x1.7 inch Sony IMX686 sensor and is the first smartphone in India to come with it. The aperture is f1.9 and you get 0.8 micron pixel size, which comes to 1.6 micron with pixel binning. Additionally, you also get an 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide angle camera with 1/4 inch sensor size and 1.12 micron pixel size, a 2 megapixel macro camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensor as well. The iPhone 11 Pro Max is a primary 12 megapixel f1.8 camera with OIS, a telephoto 12 megapixel camera 2x the focal length f2 aperture with OIS, and finally an ultra wide 12 megapixel camera with f2.4 aperture and 120-degree field of view. In this video, we'll compare just the photos from both the phones, as the video experience is too far apart to warrant a fair comparison in my opinion. For photos, we'll take a look at both stock camera samples as well as GCam samples from Poco X2 to see which does a better job against the 11 Pro Max. In daylight situations, in terms of image quality, both are excellent and it's hard to pick a clear winner here. At a glance, they both nail some aspects such as the dynamic range, sharpness, detail, and are overall visually appealing. The main difference can be spotted in how the images from the iPhone are flatter looking, both in terms of saturation as well as having more information recovered from the shadows and even highlights in some instances. The X2 photos look more saturated and contrast filled, which is attractive but leaves lesser room to play around with in post-production. Of course, for those who want to do so, there is a way to get better dynamic range and more room to play with on the Poco X2 by shooting images in RAW using the Pro mode and then processing later, and you can get effects such as this. In terms of sharpness and detail, the effect of pixel binning is clearly visible as the objects closer are rendered with better information on the 16 megapixel pixel bin images, and the iPhone falls a bit behind here. But on anything that's far away, you don't get any major benefits, and the sharpness seems near identical on both despite what the spec sheet might imply. You can also shoot in 64 megapixel full resolution with the Poco X2, but is less sharper and just has larger file sizes with slightly higher noise. No real benefit of using it apart from the larger resolution. One of the main things that Apple has been praised for with the 11 and 11 Pro series is the consistency and similarity in terms of processing between the primary and other cameras. This can also be said about the Poco X2, which has very similar output between the primary and ultra wide angle camera, which also means that whatever we noted earlier about the differences between primary cameras on both apply here as well. But the main difference here is the fall off in terms of sharpness, and the difference isn't as pronounced on the iPhone but is very apparent on the X2 while zooming, and in some rare instances there's also a color cast, like in the case of this building, which got reddish when switching to the ultra wide angle camera on the X2 while is practically identical on the 11 Pro Max photos. There's also much more visible noise on the X2 ultra wide shots. In terms of portrait mode, you would expect the iPhone to win, but the truth is that portrait mode is one area that has received very little to no improvement on the 11 Pro Max, and that means it's still poor, especially for a flagship. The Poco X2 exhibits higher levels of sharpness on the portion in focus and, most importantly, better edge detection. The bokeh is a bit creamier on the 11 Pro Max, but you can get very close to that level if you adjust the blur level on the Poco X2 photos. Not as good, but almost. Still, the Poco X2 shots are superior in my opinion. In terms of low light performance, Poco X2 and 11 Pro Max aren't too different, with a decent amount of light being present, such as in artificial lighting conditions where it's not too dark. Here the Poco is sharper and more contrast rich, while the iPhone is again laid back in terms of processing and just behind in terms of sharpness. However, when the light drops a lot, the iPhone shines, and this is where you need to use the night mode on both to get better photos. Despite the improvements brought by the night mode to the Poco X2, the 11 Pro Max is still ahead with superior sharpness, better detail and colors, as well as no shakes. The lack of OIS makes the Poco X2 prone to shakes, and the X2 also has a tendency for light flares from bright artificial lighting. It's also worth noting that the 11 Pro Max also has a similar issue of light spots in artificial lighting, which you can see in these images as well. In terms of noise too, you'll observe a big difference when you pixel peep, even though at a glance it may not be all that apparent. The ultra wide angle camera on both the phones don't have night mode, which is a shame, and while Apple doesn't seem like they will implement it natively, there are third-party apps that do that. Poco on the other hand may bring night mode to the ultra wide angle camera as well, but as it stands now, both are noisy with blotched details, high noise and artifacts, but all those negative aspects are to a higher degree on the Poco. The front-facing camera on the iPhone 11 Pro Max, you get a 12MP f2.2 camera, while on the Poco X2 you get a 20MP f2.2 camera and a secondary 2MP depth sensor. The iPhone shots have much better dynamic range, lower noise and also supports wide angle, while the Poco X2 has much better detail and sharpness. In terms of portrait mode, again like the rear camera, the Poco X2 does much better with sharpness and edge detection, while the iPhone has very poor edge detection, just like the rear camera portrait mode. In the GCam samples, you'll see a very different approach to saturation as it's laid back like on the iPhone. But it does produce warmer looking images still, and sharpness and detail are again better from X2 samples using GCam as well, and while it's similar to a stock in near objects, it does better at further objects in the frame. Dynamic range is better than stock too, especially in the highlights which are kept in check, and the shadows seem to lack the same level of luminance as the 11 Pro Max, which results in an overall darker looking frame, but that's a quick fix in post and you get results similar to the 11 Pro Max. In terms of low light performance, I was expecting a larger performance difference honestly compared to the stock camera, but that may be also because this is not specifically tuned for the Poco X2, but nonetheless the results are a bit disappointing. The noise is still pretty high, the sharpness isn't all that great, and overall not a big difference compared to the stock camera app, and the iPhone 11 Pro Max is still the winner here, be it in regular or night sight mode. Portrait mode is excellently captured on the GCam mod and is definitely better than the already good stock camera app, so we recommend using this on subjects as it doesn't work on objects. It also applies to the front-facing portrait mode as well. So overall, the iPhone 11 Pro Max is still pretty much the winner, be it in GCam mod or stock camera, apart from the portrait mode itself. However, with that said, the Poco X2 is roughly 1/10 the price of some of the iPhone 11 Pro Max models, and that is saying a lot for a smartphone that can perform so well compared to a flagship product. If you want a good solid camera at a price point that is really cheap and affordable, the Poco X2 is great, and you may not even have to use GCam mod in order to achieve most of the good results that you're seeing in this particular video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and also take part in our Poco X2 giveaway. See you again in the next one.